Host Eric here of Talking with Famous People, and tonight on Comment, Examination, Exploration, and Analysis Forum of Symposia. It's a forum of symposia. We're going to talk about Megabro's comment regarding free will. So, when I think about free will, I think the core question is, given that we cannot determine given that there's no undo in the world of space objects, we can't really go back and try it the other way. However, there is such an undo in the world of time objects. We can go back and try it the other way. And so, it would seem that in its most literal expression of it, free will is doing a bunch of different filters on Photoshop, looking at them all, and then choosing one. And in some sense, you know you could choose the other, because you could choose them both if you had space next to each to put each other there. You could choose them all. You could choose less than all of them. But it still is not a very satisfactory way of understanding free will to the TI user. Now, what the TE user is saying, what Megabro here is saying, I think, is that we know free will must occur because stuff gets accomplished. I think the TE user would say the free part of that expression is meaningless. There's no point in talking about that. We know stuff gets accomplished, and I know from experience that I can accomplish things more effectively or less effectively, more efficiently or less efficiently. And I know that it would appear to be dependent upon which protocol I set in action, regardless of whether I have free will to make that choice or not. I'm going to set protocols in action that are more efficient than to set protocols in action that are less efficient. Whether or not that's a choice, it doesn't seem to matter. I get that perspective. That perspective makes a lot of sense to me too, but I think the issue of free will is best summed up as a challenging point by the issue of probability. We know that certain kinds of random independent trials will reveal patterns that are consistent with what one might call a conventional understanding of probability. It's not ever a single instance that meaningfully has probability of occurring. Rather, it's over a series of independent trials. So, in that sense, if you are making a bet that has a 60% chance of winning and 40% chance of losing, I think what you know going in is that you shouldn't be shocked if you win, and you shouldn't be shocked if you lose. That's sort of the only information there is to glean from it. We walk through life with this series of expectations about how reality is going to play out based on what Megabro is talking about, deterministic stuff. Now, the compatibilism I want to talk about briefly too, which is my understanding of it based on nothing except what Megabro wrote here and my understanding of the word compatible and so forth. Now, I haven't read anything about it, but what would make sense to me is the following. And this fits in nicely with an existing idea I've been having, which is the linkability and parsability of a given action, and how its waves spread out. So if you think about worldviews, perspectives, and or realities, or whatever you want to call them, as being pools that are connected underneath the ground by a series of underwater rivers that function just like a set of big pipes, okay, carrying massive waters, so that each of these pools is filled by this underwater thing. Now, if you have a broad and shallow sort of time object, you throw it, or a space object as well, it can be broad and shallow, like toothpick. But if you have a time object that's broad and shallow, like a Facebook post about losing your dog or something, or losing a cat, losing a pet, it's going to make a lot of waves in the pond that you're in, which in that case would be something like an FE kind of a thing. And it's only going to make waves in that workspace of other people, of other people's feelings, or of other people's updating their version of you in their head. It's going to have a limited range in terms of number of people. So if you think about ducks being on each of these ponds at any given moment, it's only going to hit a few of the ducks, really. If you think about all the ducks around the pond, it's going to hit a minority of them for sure. Even if you think about the pond as being a small sub-pond or something. Okay. Well, on the other hand, if you come up with the idea that generates unlimited free energy, well, that's a big boulder. It's going to drop straight in through the bottom of the pond into the underwater rivers. It's going to disrupt all the ponds. There's going to be gurgling coming up on all the ponds there. All the ducks are going to be wobbling around. Because that's a time object with a lot of impact in every way, shape, and form. So you can see that they've got varying ranges. They've got varying depths of impact. They've got various linkability. They say ability to affect ponds other than their own. Or more precisely, to affect ducks on the ponds, or feathers on the ducks even. So I mean, they can affect the ducks. They can shake up the ducks, or they can change the way the ducks adapt to their environment, or etc., etc. It's a complex wave of interactions that result in outcomes from any given action. Some of them are definitely sequential, but I think that the sequences are more often than not probably broken up in such a way that it becomes impossible to say almost how it was. So you come up with any sort of string of actions that results in how it was that the original intent or idea of a plan or a protocol ended up being this somewhat different thing that sort of represents the original. How did it go from there to there and actually be implemented? Who's responsible for it? When we're talking about determinism, we're talking about causality unavoidably. And so the compatibilism then would be this. The pond itself is deterministic. The purpose of that pond is to balance some other pond and fill some gap or whatever. In a broader societal sense. Which is necessarily something has a purpose in a broader societal sense, because society itself is not a foregone conclusion. When it functions effectively, it functions because individuals conflicts and compatibilities somehow balance out adequately that large groups of people are able to find a comfortable medium, comfortable middle ground on which they can agree. So, I think it would be impossible to say that there's any element of society, quote unquote, that doesn't inform the functioning of the system as a whole. It becomes so complex, so many variables, that it's almost impossible to accomplish determinism in any meaningful sense without breaking it into smaller sets. So, the compatibilism model would argue basically that we have free will within our pawns, in our little system of pawns. We even have free will to try to expand it. But unavoidably, this is a very socionics-ish notion. Unavoidably, we're fulfilling our function in the group. And how we choose to individually exercise that function is irrelevant, because the group, those ripples don't change the fabric of the group. To the extent that I make more waves, well, that's how much any is. That's how any gets into the system. If I go too much, there's some check or balance within the system that's going to shut me down and prevent my making additional waves. There are limits to the waves one can make without causing problems. There are limits to the kind of waves one can make. So then I think the idea here is that there's free will within a duck's ecosystem, but there are ways in which the system suppresses that free will, or narrows it, I guess is a better way to put it, narrows it towards certain ends by defining the means by which that individual agent moves through life. The means, meaning, in this case, meaning the priorities, the set of priorities. In my case, disruption, accuracy, harmony, or whatever you want to call it. Disrupt, render, experiencing the meaning. That's the TI's job. FE's is to get, is to seek from others, and then SI, regulate. So those four functions, those four drives, are driving me. And no matter what I free will do, I'm on that set of, that's that string of the Choose Your Own Adventure book already. And they just need me to accomplish some outcome in that string. They don't need me to do anything in their strings. They being whom? They being everybody else in the world, or at least in America, or in any society that we look at. Any group size of any reasonable size, that's going to play basically a similar role in every one of them, which is shake things up a bit, as they say.